to a 14-win season. He was top 5 in passing, more than 4,300 yards and 35 touchdowns. That's more touchdowns than his previous 4 seasons in the NFL combined. Now, last offseason, he signed a 1-year, $10 million deal. Now he can either get franchise tagged by the Vikings or hit free agency. Pete Prisco has him at the very top of his top 100 free agents. The legal tampering period, by the way, begins March 10th. So tick-tock, we're getting close to that free agency frenzy in the NFL. CBS Sports NFL writers John Breach and Will Brinson are here with us to go through some of the big offseason needs for the NFC North. And we're going to start with Darnold and the Vikings. And why not? John, I'll start with you. What do they do with Darnold? What do they do with J.J. McCarthy here? They're expecting him to be back, but how do you say goodbye, if they even are, to a guy like Darnold who had a career year like the one he had in 2024?
Yeah, this is quite the dilemma the Vikings are in, because you don't want to just let him leave. He led you to a 14-3 record. The Vikings looked great. He had a career year, as you just mentioned. So I think if you're the Minnesota Vikings, you also don't want to sign him to any sort of long-term deal, because you do have J.J. McCarthy. And then the advantage of having a QB on a rookie contract is that they are on a rookie contract. And so you waste that advantage if you sign Darnold to a long-term deal. So I think if you're Minnesota, your best option is probably hit him with the franchise tag. That gives you a little over, you're paying him a little over $40 million. Now you have a QB locked up for the 2025 season. Because keep in mind, you don't know what J.J. McCarthy is going to look like coming off a significant injury in his knee. So you do want to have that insurance there. I don't think it would hurt them too much to keep Darnold around for 1 more year. And guess what? If J.J. McCarthy looks good, maybe you trade Sam Darnold away and he doesn't have to stick around and play on that franchise tag. But I think having him in Minnesota for 1 year wouldn't be the worst thing for the Vikings.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this is, and I feel like this is going under the radar, J.J. McCarthy had a setback during the season on his injury as well. So you don't know for sure that he's going to be ready to go. You can't sign Sam Darnold to some $40 million contract, which is what the projected value of his deal is. And by the way, the Vikings quarterback on the top of Pete Prisco's free agent list, the last guy that was Kirk Cousins. So be careful, Sam Darnold. What happens to you in 2025? I think the move here, John's right, is one of 2 things. You either franchise tag Sam Darnold, you give him $42 million or whatever it ends up being, and then you have him for 1 year. It's another audition for him for free agency next year, where if he performs really well on that 1-year deal, he's definitely going to get paid. It's sort of like, all the questions about week 18 and then, of course, the playoff performances get thrown to the side if he comes out and plays well in Kevin O'Connell's offense again. Gives you a little insurance with McCarthy. If he comes in, he beats out Darnold for the job, great. You've got your future ready to go. And if Darnold, if this isn't going to work with Darnold with the franchise tag, then I don't know, go sign Aaron Rodgers in free agency and let him repeat the path of one Brett Favre.
Yeah, I was going to say it's going to be deja vu. But in this league where you're always trying to find the guy, I mean, you just have to wonder, did Sam Darnold just need a little extra season? He's 27. He's still young. But yeah, they've got an interesting quarterback dilemma on their hands. Will, what do you think the Packers are going to do with Jair Alexander? Do you think Green Bay is going to cut bait with his 4-year contract?
I don't know that they're going to cut bait. We heard Josh Jacobs at the Super Bowl say they need a cornerback, they need a wide receiver 1, and they need a pass rusher. And he's not, it was kind of harsh words for the franchise, but he's not wrong. I mean, that's what they need. So I guess they could move on from Jair Alexander. He's, they've had the issues with him, sort of not really like off the field, but just kind of like in the locker room, as well as some injury stuff. I think they probably try to ride it out if they can in order to maintain that talent level at cornerback. Go find someone else who can be a possible cornerback number 1. If Alexander works out, I mean, certainly they could end up cutting him. But if they do keep him, you have a little insurance there at the position as well. I fully expect them, though, to address that position in a big way, even more so if they do end up cutting ties with Jair Alexander.
All right, we do have a new head coach in the division. Ben Johnson taking over in Chicago, the offensive genius that he is. He's now in charge with getting the most out of Caleb Williams. John, what are the Bears' biggest needs in Johnson's first year?
Well, I think no matter how good Ben Johnson is of a play caller, his offense is not going to work if the Bears don't get a better offensive line. So I think that has to be where Chicago starts. You look at what happened to Caleb Williams during the 2024 season. He got sacked 68 times. That was tied for the third most in NFL history. If your quarterback is getting sacked 68 times, you are not going to win very many games. So now, the good news for the Bears is they're going to have the opportunity to rebuild this offensive line, because you look at their interior guys like left guard Tevin Jenkins, Matt Pryor, the right guard, Coleman Shelton. All those guys are set to hit free agency. So Chicago can kind of start from scratch. Maybe Ben Johnson says, hey, let's go get Kevin Zeitler from Detroit. I liked having him at guard. So you have a chance to kind of rebuild that offensive line. And the other thing I think will be interesting with Ben Johnson is you looked at what he did on offense with the Lions. Well, he had Sonic and Knuckles there with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. So I won't be surprised if he looks to replicate that in Chicago, where he gets kind of that thunder lightning connection at running back. And then obviously the Bears have to figure out what they're going to do with Keenan Allen. Do you re-sign him? Do you let him walk? So they definitely have a lot of offensive questions they need to answer before Ben Johnson's going to be able to implement what he wants to do on offense.
Yeah, the offensive line is so key. I mean, we heard. That's when you knew Bill Belichick wasn't going to be involved in the Bears coaching search, was when he went on the Manning cast and dragged them for their, investing in the skill position guys and not putting the money in the offensive line. And when we talk about Detroit and how that offense operated under Ben Johnson, they had one of the best offensive lines in football for the last few years. It's easy or easier to have a great offense when you have a great offensive line. You look at the teams with the most offensive touchdowns here. Those teams, that Rams team, Orlando Pace, that team had a great offensive line. And those Broncos teams had, the Shanahan, or excuse me, not the Shannon, but the Peyton Manning offenses had the good offensive lines as well. So you've got the Lions with a great offensive line. What do the Bears have? As John pointed out, you kind of have to rebuild a little bit when it comes to that Bears offensive line. And I think that's something they really have to focus on this offseason. That's been an issue for Chicago for several years now. And when you have a young quarterback who's taking a ton of sacks behind a bad offensive line, it is going to wear on him and make it difficult for him to really blossom into what you want him to become. So I think first and foremost, you do want to try and get that offensive line. You do want to build that identity that you had in Detroit of this team that could run the football and then build off of that running game. I mean, that's what made that passing game so lethal for Ben Johnson, and his ability to do so many different things was the constant threat of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs breaking off long runs. So more than anything, the Bears have to make sure they focus on the offensive line this offseason.
Penny Sewells, they grow on trees, right? I mean, no big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Just go grab one.
Those guys are easy to find. All right, let's go back to Ben Johnson's old team, John. The Lions won the division despite all those injuries they had. Is it as simple as everyone coming back healthy, or do you expect them to reload on that side of the ball?
Well, I do think that getting guys back from injury will absolutely help. But when you look at what happened to the Lions down the stretch, you look at their final 6 games, including that playoff loss to the Commanders, they gave up 31 or more points in 4 of those 6 games. So it wasn't just injuries. It was just the wheels fell off the wagon on defense. And I really think that all started going back to Aiden Hutchinson's injury in October. The Lions just did not have any pass rush after Hutchinson went down. So I think one thing you need to do is kind of find that complementary pass rusher to go along with Aiden Hutchinson. Look, we've seen all this speculation about Myles Garrett going to Detroit. We saw him chatting up Jared Goff and Aiden Hutchinson at NFL honors. I'm sure they were recruiting him hard, because if you get Aiden Hutchinson and Myles Garrett on the same team, now you have the best pass rushing duo in the NFL. So you really do need that, because if there's another part where that defense struggled, it was in the secondary. This was a defense that gave up the 3rd most passing yards in the NFL last season. Their best corner was probably Carlton Davis. He's set to hit free agency. So now your secondary that already wasn't great could get worse. So you do have a lot of defensive questions that still need to be answered, despite the fact that you will be getting several guys back from those devastating injuries that the Lions dealt with during the regular season.
All right, John and Will, sit tight, because we will talk about the other side of the Northeast.
Quay trở lại với của mình ngày hôm nay mình sẽ tiếp tục hướng dẫn các bạn làm vòng, và hôm nay của mình sẽ có tiêu đề là hụt xôi. Mọi người, hôm nay vòng của